Is it the right thing for the Big 12 to focus on adding as many schools as possible? Because I know Brett Yormark said they're open for business, but is that the best way to proceed with business?
It really depends. And the interesting thing about the ACC, with the Pac-12, the networks, I think, helped break up the conference. We certainly left the door open with our leadership. In this case, the ACC and ESPN are the same thing. Like, the ACC network is part of ESPN, is it not? So, this one's interesting because it's very much school driven. It will be interesting if there's the participation from the networks to guarantee an increase in the pot to hold on to the teams that they want to hold on to. I think the most attractive thing for the Big 12 when you're thinking about moving forward is, can you fill in some more time slots? And right now they have UCF. They got a couple of teams in the Eastern time zone, but I don't think it would hurt them to try to grab a couple more. It just becomes like, when does it get ridiculous? Is it Big 12 West, Big 12 East, and you have a 10 and 10? Where would you set that number? Because I'm of the thinking that I still think you need 9 conference games to determine really who you are as a team. Shout out to the SEC, who does not believe that, and they're playing teams like the Citadel in late November. But I think you need those 9 conference games. Could you see a situation in which you have 2 sets of 10 and then the winners meet in some type of championship game, which the conferences have tried to get away from having those divisions. So, I would love for it to be manageable so that teams can play each other as much as possible. But I know the Big 12 did talk about pods. And if we did go into a pod situation, Arizona State probably has nothing to worry about because they're going to be with some of their old Pac-12 friends.
Yeah, and I do wonder, though, it's like, at what point are you doing too much to do the same thing, right? And you're talking about 2 different conferences or 2 different divisions within the conference. You're not going to probably have a ton of crossover between that besides the champions. And it almost feels like you're at the point right now, and I'm like trying to sort through this in my brain at the same time and figure out like what would be best. Would it be better to just add 2 schools, just maybe a Florida State and a Clemson? Would it be better to add 4 schools, Florida State, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina? I think that would be a dream lineup. Or do you go all the way? Do you add 8 schools? Do you add 10 schools? Do you take the entire ACC? Like, what's the line here and what's the best way? Because if you do have 24 teams and you split it into 2 divisions of 12 or maybe pods of 6 with some crossovers between those pods, I understand the marketing strategy behind that. I understand the television schedule behind that. I understand you have different time zones, so you can basically take over an entire day and having games broadcasted. But are you benefiting the brand of the Big 12? And are you benefiting those individual schools? Because depending on how much money the ACC brings over, which part of the reason why, schools are looking to leave the ACC is the money situation. Adding all of these schools to the Big 12, well, yes, it'll increase revenue and it will increase their TV contract. Are you splitting up the pie in too many different ways to where you're setting yourself up to get picked apart 5 years after that when we do go to just the SEC and the Big 10, because now all the schools in the Big 12 don't feel like they get their share of the pie. They don't get their money allotted that they should be getting. And now they want to go to the SEC. And then by trying to grow and trying to be progressive and stay ahead of the curve, you've actually ended up digging your own grave. And I'm not saying that's for sure what's going to happen, but I don't think that that's something that could completely be dismissed of going too far in this direction to where now you're spread too thin to address the problem that all these schools had and why they left their original conferences.
You put it as well as it can be put. I think anything more than 16 is ridiculous. I think anything more than 20 isn't really a conference. You're going to have schools that you don't see for 2-3 years at a time at all. We're already kind of in that situation. When does ASU go to Morgantown? 2027. So, we're already in a situation where you're not seeing every single one of these teams or cities every single season. And I don't love that. I think that if you're in a conference, the idea that you get to play everybody, that's what I was raised on. That's what you were raised on. At the same time, if it's going to happen, I would love some say in who they bring over. And I would start with probably trying to steal back the Bay Area and then try to steal 2 Eastern time zone schools. Now it's just which 2 Eastern time zone schools would be the best fit and add the most to the conference without taking away Arizona State's current advantage that they have in proximity to California 4-star recruits. Because one thing you have to understand is the Big 12. I think they went, if you throw out Texas and Oklahoma over the last 10 years, the number of 5-star recruits that have committed to Big 12 schools out of high school, extreme minimum. I'm probably counted on 2 hands over a 10-year period, which is why the Big 12 was a second tier conference, and it's why the Pac-12 has been so frustrating because they have access to those kind of guys. So, are you going to bring in schools that are going to raise the level of talent that you're getting out of high school? Not that that's end all be all with the transfer portal, but I do think that it's important to not fall behind because you've ignored what your talent base might be. And I think you'd have to factor that in with the teams that you're looking to bring on and understand, though, there will be competition for those teams amongst the Big Ten and the SEC.
And I think also at the end of the day, you have to look at, like, is your end goal to have the Big 12 survive along with the SEC and the Big 10 and have 3 big power conferences? Or is your end goal to collect all of the schools in the in-between, make as much money as possible, and then just merge, right? And have some sort of big acquisition deal to where it's like, okay, well, we're just going to end up doing, the West and the East. You know what I mean? It really, at the end of the day, is like, what does Brett Yormark really want from this? And we're talking like a decade down the line. This will not all be answered in the next couple of years. You might have a couple teams officially schools officially look to leave the ACC, or maybe you might have some additions to other conferences. I don't know where, Oregon State and Washington State are going to go. But if we're talking about the total dissolvement of most of the Power 5 conferences, 2030s is when that's going to be happening, and it's going to kind of be like a slow drip in there. And I don't have a problem with the Big 12 being the conference that scoops up all of these schools, but listen, you're already losing, like you mentioned, the stuff that we were raised on, where it's your rivalries and it's your 5 power conferences, and within that you have your little bubbles in those conferences or your little divisions and the teams that play each other, and you have that history there as well. And I don't want to lose it any more than we have, but it's inevitable, and it's not really about what I want. It's not about what you want. It's not really about what the fans want. Hell, it's not even really what the schools want. It's what the money drives.